Hi, this is Assemblywoman Carmen de la Rosa. I represent the 72nd District in Upper Manhattan, and I'm so glad to be here and represent NYC today. We are joined by a host of panelists, my esteemed colleague, Senator Jessica Ramos of Queens, Jonas J.N. of the Fiscal Policy Institute, and Ana Segura, who is an excluded worker. Today we will be discussing the mark-to-market tax that will create an excluded worker bailout fund. It is so important in this time of pandemic that our communities are able to get the relief that they need. And we have come up with legislation that will ensure that workers who have been considered essential for not only keeping our city running, keeping our state running, but also to ensure that those workers are able to have the economic relief that they need, given the difficulties that they've had with COVID-19, not being able to have access to many of the federal funds, unemployment, or any other benefit from government. We think it is important that in a time of pandemic, while the millionaires in New York City are getting richer and our communities are dying, that we level that playing field by bringing the relief forward. We have Senator Jessica Ramos. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for being here. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this brainchild that you have created in the mark-to-market tax.
Well, I'm so happy to be here with you, Carmen. Thank you for having me. And I'm even happier that we're working together on this, because I always like to say that from Jackson Heights to Washington Heights and everywhere in between, immigrants and people of color are hurting economically and are not seeing the relief that they need in order to put food on the table, in order to make rent every month, much less to be able to save for a future. And that's what every single person deserves. I represent, like I said, Jackson Heights, Corona, East Elmhurst, Astoria, parts of Woodside and Elmhurst in the state Senate here in Queens. And we are arguably one of the most diverse places in the country. We've learned how to coexist with so many different people, and we know it's possible, but it's only possible if everybody is able to afford to live here. And in a state where there is so much income inequality before the pandemic, and all we've seen is the pandemic really make the holes in our safety net worse, we're actually being given a political climate and an environment, an opportunity to keep everybody's eyes open to the issues that have become apparent during this pandemic and start building off of a hopefully as blank of a canvas as we can, so that we have systems that are actually able to help people thrive.
So you're absolutely right, and I love working with you because you are just such a passionate advocate for your community. Your community was sort of the epicenter of the epicenter, and there was so much loss in your community, and I give my condolences to you on behalf of the communities that you represent. You have been sort of the mastermind behind this piece of legislation. And I know that you draw a lot of your inspiration from that pain and suffering that you saw. Can you walk us through what are some of the major aspects of this legislation and what sort of inspires you personally?
Well, the legislation does two things. One is that it imposes a tax on the unrealized capital gains of billionaires. And we have to remember there were 112 billionaires before the pandemic. Today we have 119. We actually have more billionaires today than we had 4 or 5 months ago. And that's something that we need to really make sure that we understand in our heads. So being able to ask them to generate enough revenue that we estimate to be $5.5 billion in the first year, again, meaning that all of them are really just giving a tiny bit of what they have, but it will make a world of a difference. It can change a family's life, a child's future, if they pay their fair share. So by doing this, we'll take those $5.5 billion to create a worker bailout fund. And the idea there is to be able to provide some economic relief to those who haven't gotten a stimulus check, weren't able to qualify for unemployment benefits or any of those salary subsidy programs. So yes, undocumented people, also domestic workers, sometimes nail technicians, day laborers, and including people who are formerly incarcerated and just didn't have the employment history, no matter how much they worked in the prisons, that doesn't count towards something like unemployment. Unfortunately, that's something that we have to fix too. That's very kind of you to call me a mastermind. There are very serious economists and knowledgeable people behind this idea and this theory, and I really could not have done it without their smarts and their caring for our communities. And I'm very thankful to all of the organizations. I mean, Michael Kank and Jonas is here, and you'll hear from him in a bit, but everybody at FPI and a bunch of other organizations, and of course, Carmen, our favorite partners in justice, because they really help organize our people in our hoods, in our neighborhoods, on our streets, make the road and nice, you know, and everybody else who has really stepped up. We're really applying pressure here, and it's really important we keep it up.
Thank you, Senator. I think that one of the most important things of this experience has been really sharing in the camaraderie with the people in your community, the people in my community, folks who slept on the street in front of Jeff Bezos' apartment, one of his apartments, to prove a point. And so I appreciate you highlighting people like Make the Road, advocates like the Fiscal Policy Institute, who have really been doing this work for decades. We have Jonas with us, who is going to speak momentarily, but I wanted to now introduce Ana Segura, who is an excluded worker. Ana, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. I want you to give us a little bit of paint a picture for us about what your experience has been given COVID, what have been some of your challenges, and what would a bill like this mean for your family? So, en español, Ana, gracias por estar con nosotros. Yo sé que vamos a estar traduciendo tus respuestas, pero quería darte la bienvenida. Y básicamente lo que estamos preguntando es que dado que tú eres una trabajadora excluida, pero esencial, ¿cuál ha sido tu experiencia con COVID y por qué una legislación como esta puede cambiar la dinámica para tu familia?
Buen día, mi nombre es Ana Segura. Soy una líder del Comité de Justicia en el lugar de trabajo de Baker Road, New York. Vivo en Queens, donde la pandemia fue el área más afectada. Siempre he estado yo trabajando en este país, me ha tocado pagar los impuestos como cualquier ciudadana. Mi pesadilla más bien empezó en marzo, ya que perdí mi trabajo de cocinera en un restaurante italiano ahí en Long Island City y he estado sin trabajo desde entonces. Nadie en mi familia es elegible para beneficios públicos. Al principio solicité fondos privados en ayuda, pero pues ellos están cerrados y no me ayudaron. Mi arrendador me estaba acosando bastantemente cada semana, que quiere el alquiler, que pague el alquiler. Me ha amenazado a mí y a mi familia por echarnos a la calle. Pues nosotros no tenemos el dinero para pagarlo. Tampoco podemos pagar nuestras cuentas, mucho menos el bill de teléfono, cosas así. Estamos preocupadas por, la verdad, porque mis sobrinos estudian.
Te estamos perdiendo, Ana. Vamos a ver, Modesta, ¿puedes traducir algunas de las cosas que Ana ha dicho en inglés y luego vamos a regresar con ella si se le mejora la conexión?
Sí, eso iba a decir que puedo también leer su testimonio. Tengo su testimonio, ya me lo compartió esta mañana. Sí, para que la otra persona lo pueda hacer. So, buen día, mi nombre es Ana Segura. Buen día, mi nombre es Ana Segura, soy líder del Comité de Justicia en su lugar de trabajo, con sede en Camino, Nueva York. Vivo en Queens, una de las comunidades más afectadas por la pandemia. Yo siempre he trabajado en este país y he pagado los impuestos como cualquier ciudadano, pero lamentablemente en marzo empezó mi pesadilla, ya que perdí mi trabajo como cocinera en un restaurante italiano en Long Island City. Y he estado sin trabajo desde entonces. Nadie en mi familia es elegible para desempleo ni ningún tipo de beneficio público. Al principio solicité fondo privado de ayuda, pero muchos de ellos están cerrados ahora. Mi arrendador ha estado exigiendo alquiler y amenazando con echarme a mí y a mi hermana y sus niños de la casa, pero no tenemos dinero. Tampoco podemos pagar nuestra cuenta y nos preocupa si los hijos de mi hermana podrán participar en el aprendizaje remoto sin acceso al internet. Hemos estado luchando, incluso hemos estado buscando comida para comer. A menudo recogemos en las escuelas, pero a veces no es suficiente. Hay largas esperas de alimento, de la despensa de comida. Siquiera puedo pagar el aire acondicionado y mi apartamento está insoportable. Todo había tenido un gran impacto en mi bienestar físico y emocional. Me sorprende que el gobierno brinde tan poco apoyo a mi comunidad en estos momentos, que muchos están desesperados por las necesidades básicas que no la pueden cubrir. No es correcto que tenga que elegir entre rogar para el trabajo y arriesgar mi salud, o sentarme en casa y morir de hambre, mientras los multimillonarios se hacen ricos cada día más. Gobernador, le exigimos que apruebe el fondo para trabajadores excluidos. De lo contrario, vamos a tener miles de familias en la calle y eso no es justo. Estas familias somos las que pagamos más impuestos que los 120 millonarios que viven en Nueva York. La lucha continúa. Yo he dormido afuera de la casa del hombre más rico del mundo, Jeff Bezos. Hemos durado más de 24 horas sin comer. He viajado a Albany, he participado en muchas acciones y estoy lista para seguir hasta la victoria, porque necesitamos que pasen el fondo para trabajadores excluidos ya.
Gracias, Modesta. Modesta está leyendo el statement de Ana Segura, que es una trabajadora excluida. So Modesta is reading the statement of Ana Segura, who is an excluded worker. Unfortunately, Ana has internet connections issues in her home. And I think that one of the important points that we get from Ana's testimony is the harassment that she has constantly had to deal with since surviving COVID. Harassment from her landlord. We know that evictions are an issue that will take hold in our communities if relief is not brought to our communities. Internet access, which she talks about in terms of the education of her children, and having just the basic necessities met. It's been a challenge for Ana and her family, and we thank Ana for being with us today and sharing her testimony. Modesta, I don't know if you want to share a few words in English summarizing Ana's testimony.
Yeah, she just basically say the necessity. Everybody know what happened with the undocumented people, especially in Queens, Rosa, and it's very difficult time. And we want everybody know we really need to pass this legislation, because they're gonna help the more necessity community continue, and at least we can survive in this difficult situation, difficult economic. But the more difficult thing for us to understand is nobody's putting attention to the community, undocumented immigrant, that we pay taxes, we love to work, we come to this country to, to think about how to be better and serve good to the community. So that's basically how we say. I know it's long and I forgot. Thank you.
Thank you, Modesta. We appreciate your efforts, and Ana, we appreciate your courage and your bravery. This is a moment that our communities are all undergoing. So now we're gonna switch over to Jonas, and Jonas is the Chief Economist at the Fiscal Policy Institute. Thank you for being with us. If you could introduce yourselves to the viewers and talk to us a little bit about how we envision the mark-to-market tax working. And then I'm going to ask you about some of the concerns that we hear, because we're going to do some myth busting here today as well. So Jonas, welcome.
Thank you very much for hosting this. both you, Assemblywoman and Senator. Your leadership is very much needed in these very difficult times. My name is Jonas J.N. I am the Chief Economist at the Fiscal Policy Institute, an independent think tank that works on policy issues dealing with the state fiscal situation, that's taxes and spending, and also with the immigration issues in the state of New York and around the country. And before I say a few words, I would like to just take the time to highlight the experience by Ana. That experience is not unique. We do research, and of course we look at numbers, but behind every single number, there is always a person, there is a family, and there is a very much need in the state, and the numbers are very high. In fact, we're talking about thousands and thousands of people who've been absolutely left out by the unemployment subsidy, both at the federal level and at the state level. They were excluded from these benefits. And that is very unfortunate, and in fact, it's very tragic. These people are just left with no support. The economy in which they live and exist is crumbling, and it's not doing well, and there are no ways for them to sustain themselves. In a state like New York, a progressive state with a progressive governor, this situation is absolutely unacceptable. Mark-to-market tax is a tax on unrealized capital gains. So the capital gains are the growth in the value of assets. Things like stocks and bonds and yachts and houses and mansions and very, very expensive real estate that billionaires have. Billionaires do not earn income in a regular way. They do not store cash. They don't get a paycheck. And the paychecks that they get are insignificant. Nobody gets a paycheck for $1 billion. What they do, they have very expensive assets, and those assets appreciate over time. Like, for instance, since the collapse in the stock market in March, it's back up 100%, more than 100%. So that is the growth in assets that was held by the billionaires, and that is something that they can use because they can borrow, right? It's not just like stocks that they hold and it's just growing for the next generation that they want to give to their children. No, they can borrow and spend that money right now. That is income, and they're the only ones who don't pay income tax. So the mark-to-market tax, it sounds complicated, but the idea is very simple. If you make an income in any form, that income has to be taxed like regular income in an income tax kind of way.
Perfect. Thank you for walking us through that. So now my next question is going to be for both Jonas and Senator Ramos. So despite the clear need that we've already seen in our communities, and given Ana's testimony and the experience of so many excluded workers, undocumented workers, non-traditional workers, we've been hearing a lot of concerns from folks who feel that if we do this, the billionaires and millionaires will leave. What can we say to our communities so that they can understand what is the true reality of what happens here in New York City, and how this bill will seek to help those in need without really impacting the billionaires and millionaires that live here?
I would like to begin by saying that at this point, most every New Yorker knows about someone who had to move out of the state in order to purchase a home, whether it was in New Jersey, like my sister, or Pennsylvania, or even upstate. More and more people are leaving New York because the cost of living is so high, meaning that we're losing our working class tax base to other states. Those are our family members. Those are our loved ones. Those are people we will miss because we're missing them already. Who we won't miss is who we don't see, who we don't have lunch with, who, because they are inherently, most of them New Yorkers and have roots here, whether they be personal or professional, will continue to want to say that they are New Yorkers. And, I like what Comptroller Stringer says when he always says that the problem with moving, to Texas is that then you're in Texas. We have seen so many working class people leave, and that's really who we should be worried about in terms of keeping them here and making sure that we continue to build a city that works, for everyday New Yorkers.
It could be a valid concern that people will leave. However, we must understand where they're going to be going and why they would be going there. Let's say if they go to Florida or they go to Texas, there's a completely different regime. So we're not really, as a city, competing with places like that. New York is a global city. Our competition are Paris, London, Mumbai, Sydney, global cities where things are happening, where the economy is centered, and where money is made. If some billionaires leave and new ones spring up because New York produces billionaires every year, well, the net is not going to be that significant. We have to make sure, though, that we are competitive as a city, and to be competitive, well, it costs a lot of money. We have to take care of the people who live here. We need to make sure that they have opportunities to thrive, to be healthy, to be educated, so that they could be a very educated and potentially highly productive labor force on which the billionaires and the companies that they build tend to rely. So no, I do not think that the concerns about billionaires moving en masse are that significant. It could get you a couple of high lines in the newspaper, 30-second clips in the video. But if you think about the issue deeply, why people move, it's never just one factor, right? It's a combination of things. Billionaires will pay if it makes sense for them to pay, just like everybody. If they have to pay exorbitant, very high taxes, and the city and the state are run into the ground, people are sick, there's no opportunity, everybody's leaving, nobody wants to be here, there's no culture, etc., why would anybody pay? I wouldn't pay. I would leave too. But if you pay and you get your money's worth, well, they pay for lobbying, right? Lobbying is expensive. It makes sense for them to do that because they get their money's worth. So what we need to focus on is to make sure that we use the proceeds of this tax appropriately, that we maximize the benefit for our communities so that everybody can thrive. And that is a city that will live and attract more billionaires and produce even more.
Thank you, Jonas, and thank you, Senator. I am wholeheartedly agree with both of you. I think a very important point here that has to be emphasized is the tax base and the economic engine that are the workers of the city. And I think that that's the portion of the population that in this moment of need, we must prioritize. So before we close out, because we're coming to an end, Senator Jonas, can you give our viewers, our constituents, some action items that they can do right now in order to help us move this bill forward? Senator?
Well, if you are Carmen's constituent or by chance one of my constituents, you already know we're on board. So if your legislator has not signed on to our bill, it's really important for you to find out who your state legislators are. Go on the Senate page, go on the Assembly page. You should know who they are, and call them and ask them to sign on to our bill to fund excluded workers and make sure that billionaires are paying their fair share. So it's Senate Bill 8277 that you're asking your state senator to sign on to.
And Assembly Bill A10414, and ask your assembly members to sign on. Jonas, any tips for our constituents?
Well, of course, I do support the sentiment that everyone needs to be really educated about this bill and about the mechanism that it applies and about the benefit that it is going to produce. I think it's a no-brainer, and please get your elected officials on board. It's a really good bill. Educate them, educate yourself. I hope that the stories like we heard today from Ana and Modesta, that those stories will have a happy ending.
Thank you, Jonas. I want to thank Jonas from the Fiscal Policy Institute, Senator Jessica Ramos, Ana Segura, who is our excluded worker. And last but not least, I want to ask everyone to please reach out also to Governor Cuomo's office and let them know how important it is for this bill to see the light of day and to come before the legislature, because we need to bring relief to the families that are in desperate need at this time. Thank you all for joining us, and this is Represent NYC.